So hello there, welcome to today's art class with soft pastels. Today we're painting these beautiful flowers. So, lovely flowers. Now the reason I thought these would be lovely to paint is because we've got lots of gorgeous light and shadow on them there. And while you're painting it, it's all about looking for the shapes of the light, the shapes of the petals and the different colours and tones. So it'll be a lovely little exercise to do. And I'm looking forward to doing it with you. So bear with me while I flick over to my other screen. And if everyone would like to mute themselves, that would be awesome. I think I can do it from here, actually. Yeah, I can. There we go. Lovely. And hopefully, there it is. Good. Okay. And we're looking down onto my table there. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, make sure I've got the right size of everything. There we go. And I think that's a good view. So I'll just lock the focus so it doesn't keep zooming in and out, because that's really annoying. All right, so welcome to today. The first part of today's class is drawing with charcoal, and that's how I run all my classes. We always start off doing a bit of charcoal sketching. What that does is it gets familiar with the picture. It helps us to learn how to draw it up using the grid method, which you can see on the coloured picture here. And it also talks about tone, so we can look at the black and white version and we can see where it's really dark and where it's really light and all the in-betweens. So it's a great way to rehearse, I guess, and then move on to the colour version when we get to that bit. So we'll just draw up your page if you haven't done that already. We're working in a portrait shape today, so that's the shape of our page, is a portrait, so short top and bottom and long on the sides. And then if you put your grid marks on there, so you can measure it if you like. I'm just going to guesstimate it because this part of the class I like to keep it quite loose and relaxed, so we don't get too caught up in being precise. It's just a nice way to get started. So what I'll do is I'll look at the colour version first, because that's got the grid on it, and that's going to help us to draw up all the shapes inside the picture here. So we'll look at the flowers only. We won't worry about the background at this point. We just want to look at the flowers and outline those as we go. So we're looking for shapes and we're looking at the layering as well. So when you're working with pastels, I always like to work from the back to the front. So you can see in the picture, this little flower on the top left is behind this one, and then that one is behind that one. So we need to work in that order. We need to start at the bottom and work our way up, basically, because it's much easier to do it that way. All right. So before we do that, though, we'll start to draw in all these shapes that we can see in each quarter of the picture. So breaking it down into a grid is a great way just to compartmentalize portions of the picture. It changes your brain from looking at flowers and grass to seeing shapes. So that's the goal here. So when you look at your inside this top left quarter, we're just going to look for where the leaves intersect on either the grid line or the edge of the page, or where they come to in the height of that area. So let's start over here on this little petal that comes off the page. So it comes off the page at about this far down, and then back in at about that far. Okay, it should have come down a bit lower, I think. Let me find my kneadable eraser. I didn't put that next to me. Down to about there. And then it comes in on a curve to about here. So about level where it comes in off the page to about here. So then we can draw a line that comes down like that, and another one that comes across like that. So that's basically the shape of that petal there. Now you can see there's another petal on top of it that's coming from a flower that we can't see all of it. It's on the other side. So we've got to put that petal in, and it's actually inside this petal. So it sort of fits inside and it comes around in a shape a bit like that. There's other little details that come off to the side as well. I'm not going to worry about those, but if you want to put them in, you can. So that's that sort of shape there. Okay. Now we can come around and we're moving it. We're just going to do the outlines to start. Then we'll come back and do some of the tone and shading. We're going to move around here and we're going to go up to this top petal, which is underneath this flower. So looking at the shape of that guy, how high up does it go inside this quarter? It's about to there, and it's about halfway across, maybe slightly to the left. So I'm going to say the tip of it is about there. So it needs to come down in a curve and then down in another curve like that. So that's the two petals of the flower that's underneath us here. Then we've got a little bit of petal showing through these two here, but we can put that in after we do this guy. And we've got another little one that comes down through here at the base. So it's got a cute little tip on it too. It's got this sweet little shape, comes like that and then around. Okay. So I know it looks a bit weird at the moment. It's just lines, but we just need to get the basic shapes in, and then we can look at the tones. All right, so let's move around our page now. So we'll put this petal in underneath after we get these in. So we'll start with this flower next. This is the middle one, and it's sitting on top of the first one that we've just drawn in. So we're going to work out where the petals for this one fit. So the center of this flower is about here. It's just to the left of our intersection on the grid lines there. And then it has little stamens that come up like that. So I just want to mark those in and note how high they come up into this section on that grid mark. So it's about to there. Okay, so that's just roughly where the stamens are and the center of the flower. So now we've found that, we can kind of work out from there where we've got to go next. So we'll start with this flower, this petal here. Actually, no, let's start at the top. Top one where it intersects this line and it comes down. So we're just going to do this side of it to start. So it intersects the line about there and then it comes down in a beautiful arc like this. Oh, a bit wider, Jeannie, like that. All the way down to where the stamen is, so down a bit lower. I'll have to get my eraser now because I've mucked it up too much. One moment. Okay, just going to remove these lines. My kneadable eraser, really good for getting the lights and the darks with your charcoals. So that's that petal. And then this one, the next one on the left, comes out and it comes to about here on the picture. And it sits inside the edge of that petal that we've just done underneath it. So I'm going to bring it around and down to there and down to there. I feel like something's not right here, but anyway, I might make it a bit wider. Down to there. So that's that petal there. Then this one underneath on the bottom, it intersects the line at about there and it overlaps these two. So it comes out and down and around and it intersects here and then back up like that. So that means that part of that little petal that's hiding underneath can't be seen. We can just see the tip of it through here. All right, a bit messy, but anyway, we'll keep moving on. So now we've got all the bits and pieces in this top quarter. We can move over into this quarter now. So we'll go clockwise around the page. So down, across, and then we're going to bring this petal down in towards the stamen, to there, in towards the center. Should be a bit wider at the top, I think. It's got a subtle little point on the top of it, hasn't it? They all seem to be slightly different shapes, these petals. So something like that. And then this one comes out to about there, I reckon. So we can do the tip of that down into the center and then around down through to there. So you can see it looks a little bit elongated. So these top petals are longer or taller, and the ones in the front and the sides are shorter. And that's because of the angle that we're looking at the picture on. So the photographer has got down nice and low in the garden, and she's looked at these flowers on a bit of an angle, but it's quite low. So that's why these ones in the front look shorter and the other ones look taller. Okay, so now we can continue around with this petal here. It sits below this guy, so we can just put a little bit of it in like that. Like that. Yeah. Cool. And then it also continues down under here, so we can draw the rest of that in if you want to, and we can overlap that with the others later. So that goes there, and it comes in here just right there. There's a little spot there where it joins in the center of the flower. And then we've got this small one at the base here, and it's more rounded. So it comes out and it sits about there. I'll move down into the other quarter, sorry. So that's about the shapes that we need to get for that flower. Okay. This one, I feel like that needs to be wider. I'm just going to make it wider because I think it should be a bit wider than what I had it. Yeah, that's better. Makes more sense now. Okay. So we can move down now into this big one in the front. So it's in the bottom right corner. And you can see the tip of the petals come up into this quarter here. But before we put that in, let's find the center, because that's useful if we can work from the middle. So it's about halfway down and slightly to the left of the middle. So I reckon it's about here, about there where the stamen in the center is. So then we can come back up here and we can draw in this petal. So you can see the top of it comes above into the second quarter. It intersects right on that middle intersection line and then comes down through to there. And then this side, the other side of it, comes down through to there. So that's sitting on top of the one we've just done. Okay. Then we can work our way around this petal now. So we can come over here to this side, and he comes up just above the grid line there and down the side like that, and around and down through there. So that's about the size of him. You can't see the joins between these two because there's so much light shining on the petals just there. They're really, really bright. So you can't actually see the joins, but that's okay. So we can do that and then come across here like that. So we're joining up all the dots now. And as we come around, we can see this beautiful one here sits inside the page. So he sort of overlaps that petal a little bit. It's quite rounded, that petal. Comes up through here like this. Okay, so he's leaving a bit of space below it here on the corner. Then this one is longer, so it sort of comes down on a straighter sort of angle down through there, and then it arches around like this, still inside that quarter and just missing the center mark there. Then we can come around and we can mark in this petal. So beautiful, up like that and around back to there. I think I made it a little bit too big, but anyway, down to there. So there our basic drawing. That's our basic drawing. That's the lines that we needed to get into there. And I'm just marking these other little petals that sit off to the side. So we've got one down here. There's another one just here in the base. There's one up the top here. And one over there that's overlapping on the flower. Cool. So next thing we need to do, now we've got the drawing in place, just check everything and make sure it lines up with your grid lines. Everything's the right height, the right length, in the right spot. And, you know, looking the right shapes, etc. Now we can move over to the black and white version and study that. Okay, so now we're going to start to shade it in. But before we do that, we need to get the background fairly dark so that we can make these look light, because we're going to use the color of the paper for the light sections. And we need to darken off the background so that the light flowers will pop on top of it. So what we can do is just grab a little bit of charcoal. So I've got a short fat bit like that. It's just a bit easier to hold if it's a bit fatter. And I lie it flat on my page, and I can just colour like this. Okay, there's a lot of grass and stuff down in there too, so you can do some grassy kind of shapes as well. When we do this in colour, we'll mark in all the grasses with different greens, and we'll make a lovely rich grassy background. But for this section, I just want to make sure we get it dark so that we can then use that to highlight the lights. So press nice and hard. If it's willow charcoal, it's usually a little bit softer, so it's not as dark as some charcoal pencils. So you can't get really, really black with willow, but it's enough for what we need to do today. Okay. So just filling all this in. Beautiful. Down through here. And filling all the back in there, around like that. Something like that. So we just want to make sure it's sort of dark enough. Then we can really focus on the shading of the petals, because that's what is important in this picture. It's all about the light and the dark and the shadows and tones. So let's start up here in this one with this one at the top. Have your eraser nearby, because you're going to need that to get your light in, and maybe do a bit of smudging. So you can see that petal up the top there is a mid-grey. So I'm just making that a mid-grey, and I'm smudging it with my finger because I want it to be different to the background. The background's got to be darker. It's probably not as dark as I would like it. But anyway, this is just a little exercise to look at tone. And then on the edge of that one, there's a little bit of light, isn't there? It's like it's catching the light, but it's not as bright as the lights down in here. So just focusing on that, thinking about how would you do that with colour? You'd have another range of or tone of purple. So you need a few purples, I reckon. Then we can come back over here to where we started in the first place. So let's shade in some of these petals that are underneath first. We want to soften that off, blur them off a little bit. They're a mid-grey. They're not dark like the background, but they're not really white either. So we need to make sure we get the tone right. So blending with fingers. Okay. And then just going to put a bit more dark down in there between those petals, because you can see it's a very fine line of dark down between them. That's the grass and stuff underneath. Okay, so that's a nice mid-tone. So this one up here at the back, this tall one at the back, he's pretty much all the same colour. There is a tiny sliver of light right on the tip of it, just up in there. So you can just use your eraser and make that a tiny bit lighter just on the edge, just because you can. This one over here on the left is a mid-tone, and then as it comes down in towards the centre of the flower, we can see some stripes, which are like the veins or the ridges in the petal. So if you mark those in with your charcoal, so just mark them in with the end of your charcoal, just do this sort of thing, get some fine lines in there, like that, and then just softly blur them off with your finger. So we're sort of putting them in and then pushing them around is what we're trying to achieve. Okay. And then we can get the eraser again and just dab it where it's got a bit of light. You can see there's some light shining on that section there. It's catching a bit of light from above. And it's also got light coming out from the centre. So this area here is light too. Comes out from the middle of the flower. Quite bright and light in there. Okay, so it's hard to get that range, isn't it, between your darks and your lights and your mids. But we're just going to keep on plugging away. Just to study it and see where the lights and the darks are. Now, this little petal that sits on top of that guy is a little bit darker on the end, isn't it? So it's not as dark as your background, but it's darker than the petal below it. So you've got to find that happy medium of darker but not too dark. I'm just going to darken that off like that. And then it's got light on it. There's a beautiful light bit here. So that's catching the light. There must be a little fold or something in it, and it's catching the light on the top of the fold. There's also some little veins through there, so you can notice those tiny little lines. You can put those in. So it's not terribly clear because it's very messy underneath, but that's pretty much what we need to be doing with our tones. I'll just darken up under here so I can see the difference between the tones there. So sometimes if you want to get more light into something, you've got to put dark around it. If you want something to be darker, then you might want to add some light around it. So it's all that dancing between tones that makes something really pop. Okay, just going to take a bit more light out in here and down through the middle there. So that's that petal. Now I've got this little one down here, this little soft with a tip on it, and it's a mid-tone too. Hard to get in there with your fingers, I know. It's a bit messy. Just mucking around at the moment, nothing serious. And again, there's a little tiny tip of light just on the edge of that one. A couple of bits of light on that one. Notice when you're doing this with your eraser, you've got to keep finding a clean edge to get the charcoal off. Okay. All right, so then we've done this fella. Now we can see the bottom of him. So this petal here comes about there, doesn't it? Because we can see down in here the light catching on that one there. So by doing this with your charcoal, it's a great way to just rehearse the picture and get to know it and figure out where everything is. Cool. All right, so we'll just leave that there for now. And then we can move on to this flower that's on top of that one. I'm just going to put that little petal in the background there. So remember, we've got that tiny bit of petal showing through between these two. So I just wanted to make sure that was in there, because on top of it, with these two petals here, there's a lot of light, and we need it to get that mid-tone down underneath it. So this is this petal here, and it's got a really interesting shadow shape on it. It's like a step, kind of goes like that, doesn't it? And this side is darker. So it's similar to the tone of this petal underneath here. So we don't want to make it too dark. It's a similar tone. And this is shadow. Okay, so this is shadow being cast by probably another flower or something. Or maybe it's this from this petal, I'm not quite sure, is casting a shadow over this petal here. And we've just got that lovely little light edge showing over on the right side. So now I can use my eraser and get that edge nice and bright, hopefully. Make that nice and light to lighten that up and keep it really fresh and clean. So when we do it with pastel, we'll be using light colours. So that's our little shadow shape through there. There's also another little triangular shadow or light through down here, but it's not quite as bright. Can you see that one? Just in there. A bit hard to get it in there. It's so tiny. But yeah, there's a little bit of light just on this left-hand side of the petal. And then it kind of must fold in or something because it's darker in the middle. And then we've got that big bright light on the far right. Groovy. Okay, so that's that one done. Next, we can move over to this one. So this one's quite light, and I'm not going to put too much charcoal on there. I can see there's a vein that runs down the middle of this petal. It's very soft. Just putting a soft line down through there with my charcoal. And I'm just going to smudge very softly through here as well, because it's got a slight change in tone just through that area there. And then we're going to blend that through with fingers. Blending. and blend the vein mark as well. Make sure we've got it nice and dark down between these two petals so we can see the shapes. And we want to keep this fairly white on the right-hand side because we've got to draw the shadow in. The shadow is from the stamens. So if we draw the shadow in, we're just going to get this bit of fat charcoal and just do little lines like this. So just try not to make it really sharp. It's sort of a bit of a blurred line and it's got little bumpy bits on it. Just doing it like that. And that's the shadow. So now I've done that, I need to go back over here and darken this shadow because we want to make sure all the shadows are the same tone or similar tone. So you've got to keep comparing the lights and the darks to make sure that you're getting it all to match up with each other. Okay, so that's the shadow of that bit. Then as we come around to the next petal, it's got some really interesting shapes in it. We've got a line that goes through here like this, and then we have an arch sort of rounded shape that goes like that, and that's all shadow through there. And then there's another teardrop shape up here of shadow on the top of that petal, just through there. And the rest of it's really white, really bright. So we want to try and keep that as white as we can. Just going to lighten up the tip here because there's a bit of light there on the very tip of the petal. And we just want to lighten up the join between those two petals because this one actually overlaps the other one. So there should be a bit more white coming through here. A slight little whisker of a join mark there. So that's that petal there. So he's got a stripe down there, this funny little shape. And actually in there, we need to get a bit more light in there in the middle. See, it looks like a seashell, that shape. And on the left of it, there's light. And then the stamens in front of that. So we've got to make sure we keep that light for the stamen to get in there. Okay. Cool. Now we'll keep moving around. So the next petal that's sitting underneath the other flower that we're going to do next, and it's in shadow, so it's mostly dark. It's just got a really strong sliver of light running across here on the edge of it. So that goes, I need to make it a bit bigger, I think. It needs to come out a bit further than that. Like that. So it's a mid-grey or a mid-tone. And then it's got that lovely little light on the edge just through there. Hard to get my lights back in. Anyway, it needs to be a bit more obvious than that. Darkening him off a bit more. We'll keep moving around this first flower, or second flower. We'll come over to this petal here. So he's got, it's light as it goes in towards the center of the flower, and then it comes out into a bit of a mid-tone, and it lightens up again on the edges. So if we push that around like that, and then lighten up this edge here, and in the middle, so as it goes in towards the center, all the petals get a bit lighter as they move in towards the middle. This one's also got some veins on it, so we can put a few little lines in there to indicate veins, and then just softly pat them so that they're nice and subtle. So that's that one. I can lighten him up a little bit more on this end and a little bit more in the middle. The secret is getting the tones to work really well. Okay. Now we can move around. I'm just going to go a bit darker. When I squint, I'm just squinting at the picture. This shadow part here has to be about as dark as these other shadows. So I'm just going to darken that off a tad. So you've got to always keep checking the tones against each other, because you don't want one to be really bright and one to be not bright if they're in the picture they're similar. So again, I'm just going to darken that off a tad more. This one as well. Oh, lovely. And he's got a little shine on the very tip here, this one. Just on the edge, there's got a little bit of light right through there. Beautiful. Now we can move around to this one. And it's also quite dark on the top side. So up here, it's got a bit of dark. Gets lighter in towards the center and then a bit lighter towards the bottom as well. So pushing the dark in. And then we have this lovely little triangle of light. That must be the tip of the petals folded over, and it's catching the light just on the very tip there. So we're going to make a nice little pointy light bit, which will be tricky. Need a nice clean edge with your eraser. And try to get it in the right spot, which I haven't, but never mind. So something like that we need to have, and that kind of comes around like that. Beautiful, light, white, pointy bit. Cool. Lovely. There we go. So that's those guys. Again, we need to darken off where we can see shadow. Make some more drama here. And back here. The background needs to be actually darker so that we can get the petals a bit darker. But anyway, just having awareness around that is a good thing, because we'll know when we do it what it's meant to look like. So now we've got our little stamen in the middle here. We've just got to do some shapes for that one. When we do it with pastel, it'll be beautiful oranges and yellows. We've just got to do some little shapes. And it's kind of a mid-colour, mid-grey. And it starts from the centre. And we've got little bits of dark in between the petals down there, through there. So we can do that and then just dab it softly to make it a bit lighter. A bit hard to see, isn't it? Probably needs more light behind it, that's why. I just realised behind it here, we need more light in there. There's a little light spot just through there. So see how it matters when you put your light in and where you put other things, because they've all got to sit on top of each other. And so if you want something to stand out, it's got to have contrast. And then it's figuring it out, you know, what do I need to do to make that happen? Where do I need to put my lights and darks, etc. So it's problem solving, this art business. Always solving some problems. There we go. That'll do for now. This is definitely no work of art, but it's just a practice run. Let's come down to this one now. So we've got three really bright white petals through there. Okay, so this one has a very interesting shadow shape. So I'm going to try and leave it white. It says she just puts a dirty finger in there. Charcoal covered fingers. Okay, so this one has a shadow. It comes down, looks like one of those birds. Interesting shape through there. So that's a shadow from something, maybe the petal in front of it. Down through here like that. And then the rest is white. It's got a very slight tinge of tone at the top of that petal, because it's folding out, it's sort of bending a little bit. And where it's bending is where it's brightest, which is right down here, where those two petals meet. It's quite bright there. So it's slightly darker just at the top of the petals. And the other one is slightly darker also, just at the top. So remember, we need the darks to find the lights. Okay, so they come down through there and we've got a nice bit of dark behind there, so that sort of divides those petals nicely. And then we can come down through here and keep it nice and light. And then we've got this really interesting shape here. It reminds me of a praying mantis or something. It comes down through there, and that's the shadow of the stamen. Okay, so we'll just put that in like that. Then we move over to the next petal, and it's got a really strong light on it as well, and shadow. So we have a stripe or a line that comes across here, and it goes into there and around the top of the center, or around the top of the stamens. So that's that part there. It's almost like a stripe of dark shadow that runs across there. And on the bottom side of that, it's slightly tinted as well. So it's just a little bit of tone through there. And where these two petals meet, you can't really see where they meet because they're so bright. So they share the same tone or colour in here. So I've got a line there which I can't seem to get rid of, but anyway, it's okay. I know what I'm talking about. Now we come down to this one, and it comes out like this. So it's got lots of lovely tones in it, this bottom petal in the corner here. Beautiful round petal, a lovely shape, and it sits out on the dark background really nicely. It's got some little veins in there too, so you can put some lines in lightly like this. Just draw them in lightly and then smudge softly. So we just want to suggest them. We don't want to make them really, really obvious. So it comes in on a little angle like that, where it meets the middle of the flower, and then out like that. And it's got like a crease down the middle, and one side is slightly darker. So the right top side, it's a bit darker as it comes down there, through there. And then you can see that line a little bit more. So I'm going to put it in again. Sometimes when you put things in, you lose them. And it's okay, because you can just do it again. There's a lot of repeating with pastels, I find. And then there's a bit of light on this bottom edge of the petal just here. So I'm going to lighten that up a tad. It's not as strong as the big bright petals, but there's definitely some shadow happening here. You can see there's a little shape of a shadow there. Groovy. Moving around now to this long petal. So it's also got a lovely mid-tone to it. And both of them are lighter in the center, so we can lighten up in the middle and sort of flick it out a little bit so we get a nice soft merge from light into mid. And he has a curl on the end. It's hard to see because it's right on the edge, but there's a little edge of the petal that's flicking up like that other flower over there. And it's really bright. A nice little curve on it just here. So that's the edge of the petal flicking up and catching the light. Cool. Good. Really dark through there. Beautiful. It's dark in between these two petals too. There's quite a decent gap between those. So we can darken that off nicely to separate them a little bit. Then around to this last one. And again, he's got a nice mid-tone, but he's got a really light spot on the top. So we can mid-tone him, blending with your finger. So it's kind of darker at the top where it hits the light, of course, casting a shadow. And then on the bottom side of this petal, it's a little bit lighter. So I'm going to just lighten that up a tad with my eraser. And then we can keep this section up here nice and clean and white. And that sort of sits in front of this other petal, doesn't it? Sort of on top of. So we can bring it over like that. So it's very rough. Definitely not something you'd want to frame, but it's a really good exercise just to see where all the tones and the lights and things are. Just going to do these ones over here on the side. They've also got shadow and light on them. What I want to do is try and keep these flowers here, like maybe this front one to be the brightest one, where the eye goes when you first look at the picture. So you've always got to have a focal point, and it's good to decide what that will be before you start. And then you can really focus on, getting that to be the lightest or brightest or most interesting section. Coolio. So that's that bit. And I know it's a terrible mess, but we'll get stuck into it with pastel and it will be much nicer. Beautiful. So before we move on to that, I'm going to talk about colours that we're going to use here today. So I'll put them down on this page so you can see what I have picked out. So I've got a decent range of purples, and I'm going to start with the darkest. So I've got a beautiful dark purple there. Okay, and then I've got another purple, which is not as dark, sort of a mid purple. Everything's purple today. Then I've got a lighter purple, sort of more lilac-y. I think that's the same colour, so I'll put that aside. And then I've got quite a pale purple that looks almost white. So they're a really nice little combination of colours. You need your dark purples to get your darks in. The mids will be what we use for filling in most of the petals. The lightest one is what I'm going to use for where the light is. And the mid, this second purple, will be the one I use for the shadows. But we'll mix it up as we go. So we'll just have to feel our way. So I've got 4 purples, and then I've got a couple of yellows. I've got an orange, actually. There's an orange for the stamens. It's a bit dirty, isn't it? And a yellow, which is also a bit dirty. So an orange and a yellow to do these with. I had this one as well. I don't know what that looks like. Well, it's similar to the orange. It's more of a goldy yellow. Put that aside. Okay, so just two for the stamens, orange and yellow. And then we've got the background. So the background is lots of grasses. So we need to have a really dark green. And if you don't have a really dark green like that, then maybe a blue violet or a really deep blue, something really dark. You may not have a green, but just see what else you've got there. I've got a range of mid greens. So this green is sort of nearly as dark, but not quite. What's this one do? Yeah, same. So that's sort of dark too. Might not need both of those. Might put that one away. This one is a mid green. So it's like a grassy sort of green. Then I've got a limey yellow green. So I can see all these greens in the grasses. So that's what I'm looking at, is to pick up the greens in there. And then I've got a brighter green just for some highlights. So that's our palette today, basically. And I've got a white. So you won't be able to see that on the paper. There's a white there. And I'll put that over these petals when I want to get some really bright light into them. So they're the colours. If you want to grab those, and then we can get ready to draw this up onto our paper. Excuse my husky voice today. I've got a bit of a cold or something, I think. All right, so I'll keep all those pastels over there. I have my board. I'll try and leave those colours there so you can see them. We're still gathering colours. I have my board here. So I like to work on a board, and I like to tape my page down so that it doesn't move. So there's my notes. I've got 2 lots of notes today, and I'm going to tape this page down onto my board. So you can tape all around the edges if you want to keep the edges nice and clean. I should do that, actually. I will do that. be good and do it. This is painter's tape. I think it's called 48-hour tape or something. It is a bit sticky, so I like to just put it onto my towel, my cloth, or my apron or something, just to get some of the stickiness off, so it's not likely to tear too much when I remove it. And when I tape it down, I don't press really hard to make it stick fast, because I want it to come off easily when I'm finished. But it is a nice way to keep your margins clean. And when you take it off, it looks lovely and tidy. Whereas if you don't tape around the edges, you tend to get pastels all over the edges, and then it looks a bit messy. So we'll be tidy today and tape it all down. So when you peel it off, we'll have a lovely frame. Okay, and the bottom part, which you can't see on the screen, but I'll put that down here now. There, that one. Good. So I'm just going to press lightly. I don't want to press too hard. It can tear when you take it off, so be careful. And that's why I stick it onto my clothes or something first, just to make it not quite too sticky. All right, so there we go. There's my page, ready to go. I've chosen dark blue today. Why? Well, the background is blue, dark, sorry. I don't have a dark green, and I don't have a black. That would have been my first choice. So dark blue it is. So it doesn't really matter as long as it's something darkish. It doesn't have to be that dark either. I mean, you can do it on anything because we're going to fill it all up. But the good thing about using a coloured paper is you can leave some of the paper unfilled and use that as part of your artwork. Excuse me. Goodness me, fancy that coming up on there. Sorry. Just decline that. Sorry. I have turned it off. There we go. Bit rude. Now I've got to zoom in again. There we are. Apologies. All right. So you've got your colours ready to go. Now we can draw up our page. If you are on a dark page, you'll probably want a light pencil, pastel pencil or a charcoal pencil. Don't use graphite because it won't cover. Pastels won't cover, it's too oily. So this is a white charcoal pencil. I really like using white charcoal. It's a little bit softer than pastel pencil. So if you're trying to get the dot in the eye of something, or you just want to get a really small bit of white somewhere, often this is a better option than your pastels because sometimes they're quite hard. So let's grid up our page again. So we're doing it halfway. So this is 23 by 30, this page. It's colour fix. It feels like very fine sandpaper. So it's very good for pastels. And if you're struggling with pastels and not wondering why maybe they're not working as well or hanging onto the paper, just check what kind of paper you've got, because it's actually more important to have good paper than it is to have good pastels. The other thing I want to do is just mark my halfway marks in my margin like this, so that I can find them again later if I cover them up. Sometimes it's good just to have that little reference if you're figuring out the drawing again, because you can lose it inside the pastels. Okay, so I'll put this away now. Hopefully you've got all your colours there ready to go, and we can crack on. Okay, so here we go. We've got to draw it up like we did before. Same procedure, just using a pastel pencil. So just looking at your picture, you've got your grid lines on there. So we're just going to do, again, we're just going to do the outlines first. The goal here is to try to leave the petals of the flowers unfilled, because we've got to do the background first. Okay, unless you don't want to do the background, by all means you can leave it undone if you wish to, but for this class we will be. So we're going to fill in the background around the drawing, and we'll have to overlap the edges a little bit because we don't want a halo or a gap between the flowers and the grasses. So we've got to leave some space for the really light colours, because if they mix in with the greens, and they will, I promise, because we just can't help it really, they'll get a bit muddy. Okay, so let's just start drawing. Let's figure out first this flower at the back again. So we've already done this once, so we should be able to do it again. So just draw lightly. We don't have to draw very hard. Just want to get the shapes in there, working out where everything sits in relation to each other. We've got one petal that goes off the page over there, kind of disappears off to the side. There's another petal on top of that one, something like that. And then we've got this little curly one with a point on the end. He's cute. So we're just lightly marking in all the outlines. So that's mostly that one. If you press lightly, then it's easier to get it off if you need to remove it or something. So again, we'll go back to the center for this guy. So we'll start down here next to the crosshairs of the grid. That's the middle of this big flower in the middle, in the center. So he comes out, we'll start over here with this petal. So it comes out on top of this guy and doesn't quite go over the edge of that. So he sits inside there and then comes down like this. It's nice and wide through there. Okay. Then we'll just do half of this petal here, this tall one in the middle. So it intersects the line at about there, and it kind of just comes down like that. So we have a bit of a gap between these two petals, and we've got that bit of purple just behind there telling us that it belongs to the flower underneath. Okay. Moving around, we'll just do this petal now. So we'll come from the middle again. It comes out to about here. So find where it comes out to, and then just arcing around, and then down inside the bottom quarter. We'll just cheat and get down in there for a minute. Continue that line around like that. And this is the bit that's got that beautiful little white curly edge on it, just here. It's lovely. We want to try and keep that nice and clean and white if we can. Okay, let's go back up to the top now and continue over into the right-hand side. So we come across the top of it's about here, and then it curves out and comes down, and it sits below the next petal. So we can kind of finish it about here, and then we can come over to this petal and work out where it sits in relation to your page and how close it is to the edge. So I'd say it comes to about nearly halfway across, not quite, about there, and then down through here and down through there to the middle. It was a bit long there, doesn't it? Anyway. Okay. And then we've got another petal that comes underneath that now. So it comes down through here and then down into the next quarter. Something like that, because we can't see all of that now. It's underneath the other flower. But while we're on this flower, we'll just continue around and we'll do this bottom petal now that's down in the left-hand quarter. So it comes down like this. Got a little gap there, and it joins up, and then it's rounder because of the angle that we're looking at it. So rounder like that. Lovely. So that's that guy. I feel like that might need to be a bit bigger, but anyway, we'll do it like that for now. Okay, then we can come down to this one and draw that one in too. So we've got the center of this one sits slightly to the left of the center line. So if you imagine there's a line down the middle of this grid, so you could potentially put one there if you want to. So say, you can always grid your picture up into more segments if you want to. Sometimes it's easier to have smaller sections to work with. So I could do that. I can look at this and say, what's half of 5 1/2? It's about 2 3/4 or something. So halfway on my picture is there, So this middle of the flower sits to the left of the halfway line, yeah? So once we know that, then we can put the halfway line in or imagine it and make the middle of it about there. Okay, so it's all about measuring and where things sit in relation to other things. So let's come back up. We've got this petal that comes up here and it goes into this top right quarter and it overlaps this flower here. So the top of it comes across here. It intersects right on that center line where the grid line marks are, comes over into the other side a teeny bit and then pops down. So that's that one. And he comes down that side. So he's really light. It's really white, that one. I want to try and keep green away from him. Then we come across and we've got this other big bright one on the top. So it also comes up above that grid line area there. Doesn't quite go off the page. So we have it down, coming down like this. And you can look at your negative shapes or your negative space as well. So I'm just looking at the shape of the background down in here. So you can see where that area is there. So I've just drawn that shape in around there. And then it comes across where the next petal goes. So just drawing that down, 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 down to there. Lovely. Then we come down to this guy. We can't see where these two join because it's really light there. And then work out where does this fella come off the page. So you can see he comes off the edge here and it's about, I reckon about a third up. So if we find a third, let's say it's probably about there-ish. So he comes off the page about there and you can't see the rest of that because it's overlapped by the next petal. So we can put our pencil down here and draw in the next petal. It's a beautiful round petal, stays inside the page, fills up this bottom corner, and has a lovely little shape to it. Kind of thins out as it goes into the middle and then widens out into this lovely wide circular kind of shape. Then we've got this guy that's, you know, that one that has the long shape. It comes down. There's a nice gap between these two petals. So I'll have to put some green in there. That comes down to nearly off the page. And then the edge of it comes around and it sits just inside our grid line there. And it also has that beautiful little curl. We can even enhance that a tad more and bring it up a bit higher if you want to. And then the last petal on here is overlapping this guy. So it comes out. It's another little round one. I don't even know what these flowers are. I'm sure you do if you're into gardening. Someone did say the name of it this morning, but I can't remember.
They're a crocus.
Crocus? Thank
They're
you.
a crocus. Yeah, you know the little saffron, the little orange parts inside? That's where they get the saffron from.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh. How do you spell crocus?
They look like a crocus to me, but they might not be. Maybe the crocus is a little bit darker, but it's same sort of thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Interesting.
Susan.
That's all
I knew
right.
someone would know what that is. Much appreciated. There you go, crocus. I wrote it down so don't forget. I don't know if I've spelt it right, but anyway. Beautiful. So that's our little flower, and that now tells me this petal on this one needs to come down a bit lower. So see how you can sort of look at them and work out what needs to move. Where did I put my eraser? It's gone. Oh, there it is. So I can bring that down and make it a bit bigger. Down through here. Okay, beautiful. All right. Now we do have a couple down here in the corner, so we can draw those in. It's just a couple of loopy shapes. There's a little one that pokes up there too. And that's got some shadow on it as well. Got shadow there and shadow there. And then we've got this guy up the top. I didn't put him in yet, so we can pop that one in too. Just kind of tells us that this is a garden and not necessarily a, you know, what do you call them? Arrangement. Beautiful. Okay. So once you've got your drawing set up, then you can start blocking in your background. And we'll start with dark green. Just excuse me for a minute. I'm about to sneeze, I think. Sorry about that. The joys of grandchildren. I haven't had this many colds for years. Okay, let's block in the background. Now what I'm going to do is start with my darkest green, and we're just going to put a layer, a light layer of your darkest green down. Now that'll depend on how soft your pastel is and what sort of paper you're on. So this is a really soft pastel. This is a Blue Earth brand. So if you've ever used those, you'll know that they're really creamy and they fill the tooth up quite quickly. So you don't need much. So I'm just going to run around my page with my darkest green like this. I've got it on its side, lie it down flat, and just run it around like that. Don't worry about the little areas between the petals that are dark green. We can put them in later. They'll just make everything dirty again. So we just try and leave those till later. Just want to get most of this background in so that it's nice and dark. We need the dark to make the light pop. Okay. And try not to get it into your petals too much. I know you have to overlap the edges a tad just so that we don't have gaps between the petals and the grass. And we will end up smudging and getting green into it. It's just how it is. Maybe we can use some of the green for the shadows. Okay, so just blocking in now, keeping it nice and loose and just wiping the pastel over the page. And if you've got a nice gritty paper or a lovely pastel paper, it'll hang on to that really nicely. And again, depending on the pastel will depend on how much you need to put on. So if it's a harder pastel, you might need to do this twice to get it to stick. So it just depends on the pastels, the brands, the papers, all the things. Go down here in the corner. So I've got green on my paper now and a bit of dust. So once you've got your paper like that and you've got your green down for your first coat, just grab your finger and start to push it in. Now, because this is a creamy pastel, it's going to fill up nicely for me. If you haven't put enough down or if it's really hard pastel, you might have to go over it again. So just see how you go, depending on what you're using. So I'm just pushing it in. I'm not really worried about the direction that I'm pushing it in because it's very messy, or this grass is messy. It goes in all sorts of directions. So I'm just sort of pushing it in using just one finger and going sideways, up and down, all around. I'm actually keeping my finger on the page, and I notice a lot of people lift up the finger and they're doing this all the time. Try not to do that because you don't get consistency. You keep getting this stop-start thing going on and it looks pretty awful, or it can, unless you've mastered the art. But I actually leave my finger on there and just press harder when I need to and lighter when I need to. So by keeping your finger on the paper, what you're doing is you've got consistency of pressure and spread as you're blending it around. You're also moving the pigment around nicely. It's on your finger, but if it's on your finger, you can put it down in other places. So just try to keep your finger on the paper without lifting it up all the time. It'll make a massive difference to your artwork, I promise. And I don't know how I even know that. I think I might have just done it because I was too lazy to lift it up. But it just gives you a lovely consistency. It keeps everything nice and even and same. So some of this is not filling in. I'm not too concerned about that because the paper's dark already. I can probably just leave some of it to show through like that. But we're going to add a few more greens, so it may fill up even more as we go. We've got to start with a nice dark base. How's your fingerprints going? I think I'm nearly losing some doing this on the coarse paper. That's the only trouble. You start to get a bit sore in your fingers. But you've got 10 of them, so we can switch. Okay, so that's all pushed in. Once that's done, then if you grab your next darkest or your mid-green, whatever you like, this is a nice one. That's not too light. And I'm just going to do, see these swishy sort of grassy strokes. So what I've done, I've got a short bit of pastel. It's lying on its side. And I'm just doing marks like this because I'm looking at the grass in the picture and noticing the direction that it's lying there. So we've got all sorts of angles and shapes, and I'm just crisscrossing it like this because what I want to do is try to make it look like it's full of grass and leaves and foliage and whatever else is in there. So by doing these crisscrossy sort of shapes and by using the side of your pastel, don't tip it up and do a line like that. See how sharp that is? We don't want sharp lines yet. We want to keep them really soft and blurry because they're further away from us. As we work up and build up the grass, then we can start doing a few sharp lines just to, make a few strands of grass have more emphasis. But if you do this all over it, it's going to look silly. So you just have soft lines with the side of your pastel. And depending on whether you have a round one or a square one, will give you different shapes, different widths of marks. So we just want to get a really good variation of shapes and marks and keep it really loose. So I find by moving my whole arm and not just my hand, I tend to get a much better result because I'm keeping it loose and it looks more organic that way. Okay, so try to just keep your pastel flat on the page. Okay, so we've done some in the next lightest green. So now we'll see what happens if we pick up this one. This is my mid green. So put a bit of that in there too. That's nice. Same thing, leave it on its side, just swish it around in grassy shapes. You don't have to do it everywhere. You can see, leave some spots without that colour. If you look at the picture, you can see, we can only really see the grass that's on the surface. All the stuff underneath is quite dark and hidden from us. So you don't need to have every blade of grass in there. We just want to give the impression of grass or whatever these plants are, their leaves and stuff, so that it tells the story. Cool. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's actually a stalk or a stem here on the left into that flower. So we need to pop that in. I'm going to do it in my mid purple. That's this lilac-y kind of colour, because I know if I want to put a bit of light in, I can. If I want to darken it, I can. So it's always good to start with a mid. And it comes from about here and it goes down to about there. So I'm just going to draw a line down through there. It might not work very well because we're going over dark green, but we don't want it to be too obvious anyway. I don't want it to catch too much attention. You might not have even noticed it before now. So I'm going to draw that in. I'm going to tip off my dust. And then you can see there's blades of grass that sort of come across that little stem too. So we need to put a few more bits of grass in there, sort of just across it to break it up a little bit. We don't want it to stick out too much. I've just picked up my darkest green again, so I'm just using that to throw some more bits of blades of grass through there. So don't be afraid to pick up the same colour a couple of times to do things. All right, now we're going to move up into the lighter greens. So this is my next lightest. It's like a limey kind of green. And I can see there's a fair bit of that in there. So I'm just going to zhoosh it around. Same thing, just on its side. Not too much because I don't want to make it too bright. But just zhooshing it around to get some of those little bits of light back into there. And then we'll use the last green to add some shiny bits, because there are little bits of grass that do catch the light. And so we can highlight a couple of those. Just trying to keep it nice and grassy. As you go, try to sort of bring those lines that you're doing inside your petals a little bit. Otherwise, you'll end up again with a halo of dark green around the flowers and all the grass sort of outside of them. And because the grass is lying under the flowers, we need to keep it looking continuous. So I know you don't want to put green into your flower, into your petals, but just need to continue those streaks of grass underneath the petals, or at least to look like they are. Okay, so that was the next lightest. Then we can go to the lightest green. And I'm just going to put a few spots on so you can see on the picture. There's one here. There's a couple up here where the sun's catching those bits of grass. There's a few down here on the left, just little spots, not long strands, just little glimmers of light coming through. So I'm just going to do a few of those just to give it some highlights. One up here. One down there. Another one over there. So not too much. We don't want to make it a feature. We just need it to support the flowers. You could even put a bit of yellow in there if you wish. We're going to have yellow in our flowers, so it doesn't hurt to have that colour somewhere else. Just use some little spots of yellow. If you feel like you've gone too far and put too much bright stuff on, you can come back with your dark and dull it down again. Just sweep over it, shush it up a bit. Very, very flexible, this pastel business. So there we go. That's looking pretty all right. When we come back to do the little bits of green between the petals, for instance, this triangle here, these tiny slivers of dark down here, that's when you can either use a pencil if you have one, or I'll probably use this dark green, but because it's a little square, it's got some nice sharp edges on it. So I can literally just do a little, little dash and make a very tiny mark like that. So think about that too as we're going. How are you going to master that challenge? All right, we'll keep moving on. Does anybody need to have a break? I'll just check in and see if you want to stop or if you're happy to keep going. Thumbs up for the keep going. Thumbs down.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
All good? Okay, excellent. Thank you. We shall soldier on. All right, so we've got to work in the same order as we did with the charcoal because we've got to work from back to front. So we've got to really figure out where things sit in relation to each other. So we'll start with this back flower up here on the left because it's behind this one in the middle. Same process. This one top left, then in the middle, and then down onto the right one. The ones in the perimeter around the edges, we can kind of do whenever really because they're not interrupted by anything else. So they can happen whenever they need to. So let's get stuck up into this left top one. Now, what I'm going to do, I've got all my purples here. I've got my darkest, my next darkest, and then my light and my lightest. So they're my 4 purples that I'm going to use. They're filthy, I know, sorry. A bit hard to see when they're covered in greens and stuff. So I'm going to start with my darkest one. And this petal at the back up here on the left is quite dark. So I'm going to put some dark down on there. Now, I know it's not as dark as the grass, so I'm going to have to put more of my mid purple over it, but I just wanted to get a nice base happening in there. While I've got this in my hand, I'm going to put it over here between these 2 petals because we know there's a petal underneath that. I'm also going to put a bit of it over on here because this petal is a little bit lighter and it's got some shine on it, but where it goes off the page is a deeper purple. So I've just wiped that on really lightly. Okay. Then I can pick up my next purple. So this is my second darkest. See, it's a little bit lighter and it's got a bit more vibrancy. So I'm just going to put some of that over the top of my dark now. I want that to pop on top of the grass and push it in a little bit. So just pushing it in with your finger. Again, keep your finger on the paper and just pull it around. You get a much nicer blend when you do that. So now I've got to look at this and I've got to go, okay, does it need to be lighter or darker? And I think it's got to go a bit lighter because the grass is dark. So then I can pick up this one and I can go over it. Once you get the formula for each petal, you kind of then adapt it to each one as you go around. So now I've used my 3 purples and I'm just going to push this in because I want it to blend in nicely. And by doing that, I'm creating a really nice little bit of a gradient through the petal. It's not a one flat color. And you can see in the picture, it's not one flat color either. Up the top here, it's very subtle, but you can see it in the black and white one. It's a little bit darker just up there, and then it gets lighter as it comes down. So you can do that with your purples. So by having 3 or 4 purples, you can actually create those beautiful gradients. So that's nice. I've left this petal that's going to sit on top empty. I don't want to have purple under that yet till I get to it. So I'm just doing this part of this petal. Quite happy with how that's looking. It's got a few little veins. I've picked up my darkest purple. I'm just using the very tip of it to create some lines like that. I know they're too obvious when I do it that way, but if I push it in softly, just very lightly, press really lightly to see what it looks like. And if you find that's too light or dark or whatever, you can just push it in a bit harder and sort of send it back a bit more. So the pressure you apply impacts what the pastels do. So the pressure is really important. So I might leave that one as it is, except for this tiny little bit of light at the very top. It's not a white light, so I'm just going to use my 3rd lightest, or 3rd darkest pastel. My 3rd, just call it 3rd, Jeanne. My 3rd purple, just on the top there. And try not to blend that in too much because it'll lose its vibrancy. The more you dab or blend or pat, the less bright something is. Okay, so we've got that one happening, and it comes down into the center of itself about here. So I've picked up my light purple now, and I'm just merging that up from the base here. There'll be a little yellow stamen in front of it soon, but pulling that up into this petal here. So it sort of merges from light up to mid or dark. Okay, I don't want this to be really white or bright because I want to save my brights for those other petals on the other flowers, but it still does need to be a bit lighter than the rest of it. I'll put a bit of this lighter pinky color over it just to quieten it down a tad. There we go. So that's nice. And then that continues. There's a bit more of that over here too, for obviously that other petal that we can't see. So I'm just going to lighten up that spot there between those 2 petals that we'll put in later. So we close the gap then. We haven't got any gaps between them. So next we need to move over to this guy here. So same process. We're going to come in light from the center, that's here, up into the darker, and just kind of pull the pastel up like that, and then blend with your fingers. Keep your finger on the paper and pull it up and down like that. So you get this lovely blend from light to dark. Okay, we just want something that's really subtle and gentle and lovely. Beautiful. Don't blend too much, because if you blend too much, you'll just make mud and it'll all end up the same color. So you've got to know where to stop. That's the tricky bit. So you just got to do a couple of blends and then leave it alone, and know how hard to press as well. Now, this one has some light. There's a little bit of light right there, if you can see it or not. But there's a shine on that just there. I've just used my pale purple, my very light purple. And there's also some more light coming up through here. So that's my lightest purple. I know it looks like white, but it isn't. And then I can just pull that up softly like this. I'm going to dab that a little bit because I don't want it to be too bright. You're always thinking about the other parts of the picture, which parts need to shine and which don't. So that can stay like that. It's quite nice. And then I can come back with my other next lightest purple and just do a few little lines through there to get the veins going up into that section there. And then a bit more of the lightest purple for some veins. Just trying to indicate the shape of those in the base of the petal there. Lovely. And that kind of comes over here a bit, doesn't it? I'm just going to bring that across a bit more. Up through there and then blend that through too. There we go. And then we want to bring this other little petal that sits here over the top. So I'm just going to draw it in with this purple. And he's got a little bit of light on him too. It's quite lovely. Just going to draw the shape of it first. So I'll get it in the right spot. Now the tip of this petal is darker. So we can do that in our mid purple. That's not my darkest one. I probably should put a bit of dark on there though, I think. Add a bit of dark purple in there for some drama. And mix that in with my mid purple. So that's that little petal sitting on top of that guy. And then on the left side, it's got a shine on it here, hasn't it? So we've got this lovely light section. So try to press, when you want to get a hard, firm edge, get the edge of your pastel and push it down and run it along where you want that line to be. So you're trying to get a nice firm edge. And then we're just going to run across like this because this is the light shining on this particular petal. It's the light side. Need to put more purple down in there anyway. So that sits like that. And then it's got a teeny bit of light just on the edge here. So this is my light purple again. I won't use white until the end. So if you see me using something light like this, it's not white. It's a lilac. But it's got a bit of a glow just on the edge there. It's also got some veins and creases and things, so you can muck around in there a little bit and get a bit of texture and a few lines and things happening. Beautiful. Just got to tip off my dust. Okay. Just going to fill in this bit here because this needs to come across like that. Okay. Lovely. So that'll do for that bit. Then we can move around and do this little one down the bottom here. So it's quite light, isn't it? So I might start with this purple. And he sits up. Let me see, where does this go? So that goes under there. Dips down a little bit there. So continue that petal there. Now I need to darken the one above it because it looks like it's all together. See how you've got to keep dancing between your tones to get them to sit together or apart. This is the challenge with flowers or something that's got the same colour all over it, trying to, get the petals to sit on top of each other, and it's just subtle changes in tone that will help you create that. Okay, lovely. It's a bit better. And then this little one comes down here, so it sort of comes out here, across to there, and then down like that. It's about that shape, I think. So I'm just going to put my light pinky colour in there to start with. I've got green in that, sadly. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll just push it in. because I can't get rid of it now. And then I'll pop some purple over the top, and hopefully that might hide the green, or the green might even contribute to creating some of the shadow. Beautiful. And then we've got a little bit of light just on the edges. There's a touch there. There's a touch over here. Oops, I missed. There's another touch just there. So soft little bits of light. Just going to dab them lightly, softly, just to push them in a tad. And then I might come back in and just sharpen up this point on the end of the petal. Like that. There we go. Tipping off more dust. Okay. So that's that bottom flower. We've just got to put his little yellow bits in there now. So his yellow bits come up through here. I've got my orange pastel. This is also a blue earth, so it's very creamy, and it kind of just sits on the paper and hangs on. It's lovely. Again, it'll depend on what pastels you have as to how well they'll stick. You might have to go over it a couple of times. You might need to add another colour to get it to glow a bit more. And there's some little spots, little dots of stamens over here. Dots, beautiful little orangey dots. There's a bit of shadow down in here too, I just noticed. I'll make that a tad darker down through there. Just because I can. And I'm going to lighten up through here a little bit, just as it comes up into the yellow orangey bit. And then I'm going to grab my yellow and put a bit of that in. Oh, it's a dirty yellow. Now I've got green in there. Great. Let's put a bit of yellow into there. And I'm going to tip off my dust because it's left a bit of dust on there. That might do for that part. The only other thing we've got to do, if you're brave enough, you don't have to, is to try and get a bit of a slither of dark green down there through those petals between the two. If you've got an edge on your pastel that you can do that with. Otherwise, don't worry. Don't stress about it. Okay, throw a bit more orange on there. Lovely. All right, now we can move around and do the next flower. So just want to have a look at this petal first before we do that. Just want to make sure the colour is right. So this one here belongs to this flower we've been working on, but I need to make sure it's kind of dark enough that the light petals on top are going to sit out from it. Okay, so again, it's looking at tones. And now I can start on that flower. So let's get stuck into that one. We've got to look at the order of the petals here. We may as well just go clockwise like we did before. I think that'll work. So we'll start over here on this one at 10 o'clock and move across from there. So before we get started, I just want to point out that we need to kind of draw the lines back in again if you've lost them, because I know I've lost mine. And this is what happens, doesn't it, with pastels? You just lose all your drawing as you move on. So that's about where that one goes. Draw this one in. Just want to make sure I've got my drawing and everything in the right spot. Okay. Lovely. There we go. So that we've roughly got all of that in the right place, which is great. So now we can start to fill in these ones. I'm going to use my light purple, not my lightest, because I'm going to save that for those really light parts. And I just want to get some of this down first, especially down in the middle here, where it gets light in the center. And then I'm going to go in here with my darker purple. So you can see we've got a dark shadow. Now that needs to stand out from the purple below it, doesn't it? You can see how now they're kind of mixing in together. But the edge of this top petal seems to have a bit of light on it. So I'm going to have to come back in with my lighter pinky colour and put some of that in there just to separate it from the petal below. So if I do my line again, and then I'm just going to softly blur the line on the inside of the petal and then just pull it in with my finger so that we get a nice soft sort of edge that's a little bit lighter through there. Cool. Because this petal is not actually that dark, but the shadow is dark or mid. So this is the thing we've got to keep looking at, is the tone of the shadow. So I'm just going to pull that down a bit through there. Okay, and then pulling up from the light into the mid to get that beautiful blend happening from the center of the flower. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's some little veins in there. So I'm just going to use the edge of my darkest purple and draw some little veins through there. Just softly, softly, like that. And then I can push them in and soften them off, because we don't want them to be really strong like that, but we do need to talk about them a little bit. Okay, so if they're too dark, if you find they're too dark and you want to soften them off a little bit more, just come back over with your lighter pastel and push it in a bit more. There's a lot of toing and froing, so you might find, oh no, that was too dark or too something. So then you've got to come back in with your light again. There's a little bit of light down in here. I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of this light, pale purple down into here, and I'm going to blend it in so it doesn't stay too light. I just want to lighten up that section down there. And now we can put the light on. So see how I've left that step shape with the purple? So the light side of this one comes down like this. I'm just using my very pale lilac to draw that down to there. And then I'm going to just fill in that shape. So there's a shape like this, not perfectly straight, sort of a little bit organic and wonky, but that's where the light is shining on that petal. I reckon. And then I can come back over now and add my purple in where I need to fill in. If you haven't got it in the right spot, you can come back now and fill that in and get the shadow onto that petal. I'm trying not to put my fingers into that very pale area because it'll just get really dirty. So if you have to, you have to. But try to use your pastel to sort of push it in and let it sit there without sticking your fingers into it. It's really hard not to, so I really want to, but I know if I do, it's going to get dirty. So let's try and keep it clean. Tipping off dust, and then we'll move on to the next petal. Lovely. Okay, so the next petal is also really light, isn't it? It's very pale. It's got really light pink at the top, and then it oozes down and it gets quite white here in the middle, but it's got a purple shadow, which is the stamen, the shadow of that onto the petals there. So looking at these shapes, we have to put these shapes in. So I'm going to pick up my pale pink first, and I'm going to put that up here because I can see it is sort of around the edges, particularly on the left side. It's my pale, not my lightest, but it's that light pinky colour. I'm going to zhoosh a bit of that down through here with intentions of pushing it in once I get some more pastel on the board. Okay, now I'm going to pick up my mid pastel. This is my mid purple, and just put a little bit there too, because there's a slight little bit of darker tone there. I can see it in the black and white picture, It's a little bit of darker tone just there. So I want to make that slightly darker, and then the right side can be nice and bright. So let's push this in first. See how I'm overlapping the grass as I go? I am picking up a bit of green here and there, but never mind. So pushing that in like that. And then on this side, it's really light. So I want to get this lightest purple that I've been using. I'm going to pull that down here. Okay. Pulling that down through here. And it also comes out of the center because we've got this lighter area coming out of there. All right. So that's, now I'm going to have to put my fingers into this because I want to make it stick better. So I'm going to clean them off with my little wet towel here as best I can and dry them. Now I'm just going to start, try and find, this is my cleanest finger, so I'll use that one. Try and push that around down through here. So I want to get a beautiful gradual sort of blend from the purple into the light. So notice how, again, I'm just keeping my finger on the page so that it's sort of moving the pastel around nicely. It's spreading it nice and evenly for me. Ooh, that's yummy. Okay, that's good. That's what I wanted. So now I'm going to pick up my pale pinky one again. And I just want to touch up the edges just a tad more because I can see there's pale pink on these edges and it's quite lovely. And remember, we want to save the light for last. So when we do white, we'll do that on those really big, bright petals. But for these guys, we'll just use the very pale purple because I don't want to go to white just yet. Lovely. There's also a little, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little crease just here. Just a little tiny crease in the petal. It's going to mark that in with my mid purple. Don't know if it's going to work or not, but see what happens. I just dabbed it on and then I can push it around a little bit. Just gives the petal a little bit of, you know, texture and body. Okay, lovely. Good, good. Wiping, wiping. This might have to be my light finger. All right, and then we need to put the shadow in there. So that's the shape of the shadow you can see there. So it comes from about here. I'm just going to draw it in with my short bit of pastel. I'm using it on its side again. It's not a hard straight line. It's kind of got a bit of a wiggle to it and rough edges. So I just want to pull it down like that. Keep it a little bit loose because it's the stamen and they're not straight and hard. They're sort of soft and blurry. I'm just pulling that across like that. So that can be the shadow of the stamen. Nice. And I want to whiten off in here just a tad more with my very light purple. So always checking your lights and darks. There. Tipping off my dust. We can work our way around the picture now. So as we come around, you can see the next petal has a lovely big white patch, but really interesting shapes. There's almost a teardrop shape here where there's shadow. This shape here is shadow from the stamen. So it's got this little wiggly top like a seashell almost. And then we've got another line that goes up there. So we'll have to put those in too. So let's do pale pink on the tip up here, trying to keep it nice and pure and clean without getting green in it. A bit tricky, very tricky actually. And then we can use our very light purple. So pick up your lightest purple, it's the not white one, and we're going to mark the edge of this petal, and it's sort of, it sits over the top of the one we just did. But it's hard to see. Well, you can see where they join actually, because that one's slightly darker underneath. So that's good. And then we can draw in the shape of the light. So the light Comes across like that, and it's got this little wiggly shell shape. So all this part in here is white, except for that stripy bit, which I'll put in after. That line. Okay, so that's my lightest part of that petal. Just going to blend that with my cleanest finger, my white finger. And push it in, make it stick. Lovely. And then up here in the top, this teardrop shape we can put in with the mid purple. Okay, so that comes across to the edge of the petal and down. So I've got that shape there. Like that. And then down here we have this little, looks like a shell to me, a little shell shape. Little jagged ends on it. And it comes into the center. Like that. And then we have another little wiggly line through here. Like that. Lovely. I feel like that shadow is darker than the first one over here, so I'm going to have to darken that up a tad. Just go over it again, put another layer on. All right, tipping off your dust. So that's nice. So I'm just going to just touch up the edges of this, make sure it's nice and sharp. And we want a really distinct sort of shape between the lights and the darks here. There we go. So that's nice. That'll be a lovely shadow. While we're there, we can put some veins in this one. I can see veins in there. So I might just put dark ones up through here and down through here. And then lighter ones through the white or light section. So kind of got to continue them on, but with a different colour, just so that they don't get too dark in amongst that white part. And then again, just want to dab it in. So I might lose them. We'll see how we go. And dab this one in. It's for my dark finger. All right. This one comes all the way down to there. Joins on. Super duper. Lovely. So now we can move around. I just want to put a bit more light in here as we come into the middle. I'm going to lighten that up a little bit in there. So what we've got to do is get yellow over the top of this when we put the stamen in. So you've got to think about that as well. If you have trouble with that and you have a can of fixative spray, you can always give it a little spray just where you need to put it, and that will set all the pastel underneath. So then you can put down your next colour and it won't pick up what's under it. So that's always a good option if you have a bit of fixative. I'm just sharpening up the core edge of this one. Try and keep my edges nice and crisp. It's a bit tricky. Okay, now we'll move down to the next one. So the next one is underneath the bottom flower. So we can just put some purple through here. Now remember, it's got a tiny bit of light on the bottom of it. I'm just going to put some purple in there. That's my mid purple. Push it in. And then there's a tad of light just out here on this edge. And there's a slither of light there. Maybe it should be a bit whiter than that. I'll see if I can put this light purple over it. Lovely, that'll do. And there's going to be green in between these two, but we might put that in afterwards. And I'm going to just lighten up a tad here where the purple goes into the centre. So my pinky colour, just in there to give it a bit of variation of tone. Beautiful. So that's that bit done. Then we can move around and do this guy. So this one's sitting underneath that one as well. So we can come in with your mid purple. There's no strong light on this one, so it's still got a nice bit of gradient and a range of tones through it, but it's a bit more subtle. So it's whiter or lighter in towards the middle. So we'll lighten up in there. And then just gently pull some of this light pink, using my pale pink, not my lightest purple, to lighten up this petal here. And there's a bit of light on the end as well, just on the edges around here. Okay, so I'm just going to pull that across softly, softly. Like that. So what that does is hopefully it looks like it's kind of curling around a little bit and bending. So it's creating a nice little bend in the petal as it sits behind this big flower in the front. I still want to add a bit more light through here. It's also got some veins, so we can use the darker pastel to put some veins in and then softly push them in so they don't look too obvious. I think I've lost the veins and everything else pretty much. So pulling my darkest pastel out, just using the very end, hardly touching the paper, just keep it really light. So I'm going to get some little veins like that in there, and then I can just softly pat them in. Keep them nice and soft, subtle. There we go. Oh, they're nice. Quite like those ones. Okay, tipping off the dust. We've nearly got one done. And then we'll come up to the final petal. So this one's interesting. It's got a light section in the center as it comes out from the middle. When it comes out, it's got a darker purple at the top. It's a pinky purple, lighter tone at the bottom here. And then we've got that cute little curl that's catching the light. So we'll probably have to use most of our purples in here. So let's start off with the light coming from the middle. And I think I need to lighten that up. Just before I do that, I want to come back to this other petal first. Just lighten up a tad in there and then put some of that in here as well. This is my very pale purple. I'm just using that to get some light there, and then I can kind of blend it in with the other colours. Okay, so that's that guy. And then I'm going to use my pale pink to do the bottom section of this petal. So again, we've got some green sneaking in there. So I just have to put more pastel down and try and hide it. So there's some pale pinky colour there. And then on the top left of it, we've got the mid purple. So that's this one here. Okay, so I'm just going to draw that in. Nice sharp edge, and it should stand out against the stuff that's under it because that's lighter. So we've basically got pale pink, mid purple, and your lightest purple in here. And we're going to just sort of push them around a little bit to blend them together so it doesn't look like big blobs of random colours. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm making it nice and smooth and blendy. Lovely. Lovely. Then we're going to put some veins in just like we did before with the other one. Pick up your darkest purple. I'm not using blue violet, by the way. This is not as dark as that because I think it'll be too kind of dirty. You lose the vibrancy. And some little veins like that through there. And then just dabbing those in softly so they get lost a little bit. Softly, softly. That's nice. Good. And now we can come to the end bit here. So I'm going to use white now because this little curl on the petal is quite bright. And it's a very definite shape. So we want to use, I'm going to use white. Let's try see what pencil does first. This is my charcoal pencil. I don't think it's going to be bright enough, but we'll see. But I can mark it in with that and fill it in with that. And it's getting a bit of green in there. That's okay. So I can do that kind of thing with it. Just got to make sure you get the shape right so we get that little twist of the petal. It's looking nice. Tip off dust. And then I can come in with my white pastel and I can just touch it on there now because I don't have to draw the shape. If I used a pencil, it's all the work's done. I can just touch it in that section and get that really bright. See how lovely and bright that is? Yummy. I love it. So I would save the white for last, or the really bright bits, because we don't want to waste it on all the bright bits because then they won't be bright anymore. So that's my theory anyway. All right, so now we've got to work on the middle of this one. We've got some orangey colours around the bottom there, so sort of a smishy, sort of fluffy orange colour through there. Then it goes up into what look like two little stalks or something like that. So I used my very pale purple to put the little stalks in there. And then on top of the stalks, it's like there are three pieces. We have one either side of the middle bit. So there's a right side and a left side. And then the middle bit sort of comes up through here. And it's quite tall. Just noticing how high that goes. It's up to about there. That's huge, massive. Okay, so that goes all the way up to there. These side bits kind of come out and then they curl back in towards the center again. Something like that. And I'm going to pop some yellow onto those in a minute because there's yellow and there's orangey or rich goldy color happening. Okay, so a bit of yellow. This yellow is harder than my orange, it's a different brand. I think it's Art Spectrum. So I'm going to have to press a bit harder to make it stick. And sometimes it just depends. It's quite hard. And it's often hard to get that really vibrant color when you've got lots of pastel on the paper and you want it to pop. But anyway, I think that's working out okay. So something like that. And I think it might need a bit of shadow too. So let's just grab a stick of charcoal because it's smaller and I can get in around it. Now we've got to think about the light. So the light's coming from the sort of down here, isn't it? And it's coming up because I know that because this is casting a shadow there. So it's got to be coming from low down. So we need to get some light on the right side, or sorry, shadow on the right side of this stamen just to give it a bit of body. And I'm using charcoal just to touch a little bit of dark around it. Just a slight, not much, just a tiny bit to give it some bit of a 3D look. I don't know if that worked or not. I think it did. Kind of just helps to make it look solid. And we have got those little dark bits, see, between the petals here. Oh, we can use charcoal to do that. It's probably a better option, actually. So if you've got a little bit of charcoal, like this skinny piece, just use it to those tiny bits of dark down here in between these petals where they join in the middle. It separates them from each other a bit and it saves you trying to get that big fat green pastel in there. Nice. So charcoal's good for that sort of stuff. What else? I think that'll do for that one for now. You can always come back and touch things up if we have to. So we might move on to the next flower and get that one done. Okay, so much dust. There we are. Lovely. I'm not liking those little white bits in there. Too white, I think. I'll zhoosh them in a bit. Better. Yes. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So we need to work out again the order that we do this one in. So I reckon if we start top left and then work our way around clockwise, we should be right. Except when we get down here to the bottom, because that one in the corner sits on top of that one. No, it doesn't. They're separate, aren't they? Different shape. Okay, cool. Let's do that. So this petal also has strong shadows on it like these guys. So we're going to do the same process with that. So up in the top, we've got a little bit of pale pink on the tip. So I'm just going to mark out the shape around here on top of that one. Bring it down the side there. So we're going to have white down the side, and we're going to have, not white, pale purple down the side, and the darker purple up the middle where the shadow is. So I'm going to get my lightest purple, and I'm going to try and find a nice sharp edge and get the edge. Sometimes it's hard to find when they're a bit soft and wonky. Get the edge of that one all the way around to there. Okay, and the shadow comes up right to the edge of this petal. So it comes across like that. And then the light side is down through here. This is a nice big chunky stick. This is an Art Spectrum Extra Soft square. And I bought the purple set. So it comes in a range of purples from really light, like this one, all the way up to the super darks. Beautiful. Okay, and then a bit of light on this side. It sort of comes down like that shape there to the edge. So that's the light bit. I'm going to use my light finger and push that in, just so that it hangs onto the paper and gets nice and bright and thick. And some of that pinky colour down from the tip. Lovely. Tip off my dust because I can't see if my edges are straight or not. Not quite. Let's see what a white pencil will do. I can just make that sort of merge in with my light purple to give me a sharper edge there. That works quite well, doesn't it? Cool. All right. Then I can pick up my shadow colour. So that's this mid purple. And I'm going to draw the shape of that shadow in here. It comes down like that. It's almost like a bird of some sort. And then across to there. And then down. So this part's all mid purple. Tricky getting these little shapes and lines and things in. Cool. And then I'll use a dirty finger for this one, this section. Bit hard to get into that skinny bit. So I can just tip off my dust and then I can just touch it up with my pastel lightly to get the right coverage and shape. Beautiful. Now I want to put a bit more pink in the tip of this one because it kind of got lost before. So I'm going to smush a bit more pink in the tip. Just because it needs a touch of pink, a bit of a blush there. And we've also got veins in this one, but they're not dark. They seem to be a bit lighter. So let's see what happens if I do it with this pale pinky colour. Some veins in through there. What happens if I do that? It's fun to experiment, see what happens. Dabbing, 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 pushing it in. Not a fan. I'll push that out now. Let's put more purple on, make it go away. Pastels are very forgiving like that. You can fix things pretty easily. I love it. Okay, good, good. Now, tipping off my dust. Haven't used that darkest purple very much, have we? There's really not much darkest purple in there. Anyway, that's okay. So we'll move around. We'll keep moving around our picture. So we're going to go over to this right-hand petal, and it's nearly all white, or bright, I should say, light. So I'm going to come down here like this with my big, fat, pale lilac and draw in the shape of that. It's got lovely shadow on it of the stamen. Okay, so I put that in. Now I'm going to blend it in, push that in with my finger because I want to get all this to stick and hang on to the paper. I'm going to have to get some green in here between these petals. See this little V shape here? We need some grass. First, I'll tip off my dust. I might finish the petal first. I'll work on him first. So pale pink up the top. They all seem to have a bit of pale pink up the top, don't they? On the tips. And then it oozes off where it's really light into the brightest, lightest area. So this is where we want to start thinking about using some white. Because this part here is super bright, it's also quite bright there. So maybe we can touch some white on in a couple of places. But just start looking for that and thinking about where can I put the white. Let's put some just here on the left side. I just want to show you how white is compared to my pale lilac. So that's white. So it is, you know, not a lot brighter, but it definitely is lighter than what we've been using. And that's why I've saved it for last. And then I'm going to put some up in here as well. I just want to get this really bright. If I push it in, it's going to lose its brightness a little bit. But if I just go very lightly and let it sort of sit on the top, like that, then hopefully it'll glow a little bit at the end. Now I've messed up this edge here, but that's okay. When I come back in with my grass or greens, I'll see if I can clean it up with that. Now I'm going to draw in the shadows. So this is a funny little shadow. It looks like antlers of some sort. Drawing that in down through there. And another one next to it. So I'm just using the tip of my mid-purple pastel to draw in these shapes of the shadows that I can see down through here. So the left one tapers off at the bottom, and then the right one is a bit fatter, a bit chunkier. So that's those shadows there. Not quite right there. It should be a bit closer, but never mind. That'll be fine. We've also got shadow, missed that before, in here. So this is shadow from the yellow bits. So we're actually looking down on this flower. We can't see the stamen's height because we're looking down on it, but we can see them in the shadow. Coolio. So I reckon that might do for that guy. And we can keep moving our way around now. So the next one is also really bright and light. So you can't see where these two start and stop really, except now I've put white on one and not the other. You sort of can, but that's okay. So I'm going to put this pale purple here, my light purple, down through here. And a bit of white just for some highlights. Mix that in there with that, because that's my beautiful bright white. Then blend it in a little bit. Get off my dust. Now I've got to do shadow. So if you look at this petal, you can see there's darker shadow here where the petal gets a bit darker in colour. So we've got the pinks and the purples here. Then as it comes into the middle, it gets lighter again. So we need to put some darker pink or purple here. And then the edge of the petal that isn't, oh no, I just dirtied my clean finger. Whoops. Edge of the petal that isn't in the shadow, this bit down here, I'm going to do that pale pink. And then I can zhoosh a bit of purple into it if I want to. Get some from there and put it in. That's nice. And then I'll have to sharpen up this shadow edge. Oh, that's my darkest purple. Oh, well, throw a bit of that on. And then put this one over the top. They all look the same because they get so dirty. There we go. Oh, that's nice. And then we've got shadow that comes across like this, haven't we? Through there. There we go. Beautiful. It all seems quite weird when you're just putting shapes in, because you're thinking, how is this going to work? It looks really weird with these silly purple shapes, but it will, and it might not today, but when you look at this again tomorrow, you'll see it, because that seems to be the way it works. While you're working on it, you can't kind of, I don't know, can't see it for what it is because you're too close to it. So you need to step away and have a little rest from it and then come back and you'll see it then. Okay, before we move on, let's get this bit of grass in here. So I've got my darkest green, and I'm just going to try and draw a bit of a triangle down here and sharpen up the edge of this petal. Like that. That's probably enough. I don't want to do too much more because it'll get really dirty. So we'll just leave that right there. Okay. Now we can move around. So the next petal, this one down here, he's a pale pinky colour. It's got some purple in it, but it's a little bit lighter than what we've been using. So I'm going to do it with pale pink first. And there is also a shadow on this one, but it's not as bright. So it might be a pale pink shadow or light, a bit of light. And then the purples can be the shadows. I'm just marking that in there like that. And then I'm going to put a bit of light in here towards the center because it seems to be a bit lighter where it's coming out of there with my pale purple. Then I'm going to use this purple and just some of that over it just to mix it in a tad. Like that. So that hasn't been blended yet. So I've got pale pink, mid purple, and my lightest purple here down in the middle. I'm just going to sort of push it around. Oh, there's my clean finger again. Push it around. Just merge them together a little bit to create a nice little interesting tone of purples and pinky colours. Softly, softly. Keeping my finger on the page, gently, gently. So that's quite lovely. I can see a little bump in that, which I made accidentally with some dark. It's nice. Now I'm going to put a few veins in. I'll try this mid purple first. I don't want to go too dark. Just do some lines like that with the mid, and then just gently pull them around, or pat them, or dab them, or do whatever you need to do. A bit too strong, so I'm going to dab them a bit more, soften off the ends so they sort of disappear. That's better. Now it looks like it's got some texture. Lovely. All right, so that's that one. And it has got a little pink, a little bit of light just here, isn't it? Where it's got shadow cast from somewhere. It's a soft shadow, and it gets light around the edge there. That's a bit interesting. And it's got a little bit of light just around. Just going to bring it from the shadow around the edge to there. Just a teeny bit, right on the very edge. Might need a white pencil for that. Let's see. These white charcoal pencils are really good. I actually prefer them to pastel pencils because they're softer. And you can get a bit more mileage out of them. That's looking nice. That's my favourite petal so far. You always end up with a favourite. And you can't ever make it do that again. Okay. This one, we've got green between these two. I can put that in after. This one's got this beautiful purple down here. And then it has that little fold up light bit that we've talked about before. So I'm putting my mid purple on there and I'll push it in. Like that. Then I'm going to add my pinky colour, my light pink. So that's sort of around the edges there, isn't it? It's catching the light on the edge. Put a bit of pink around through there. And then in from the centre. Put a bit more of this very light lilac in there as well. There's got a bit of a light edge running up through there. So that's kind of blocking in the petal. And then I'm going to come over and just start to push it around a little bit. Blend it in gently, gently, so that the colours merge nicely. You don't want any hard lines between your colours. We'll keep it nice and soft. There we go. Beautiful. And then we've got that lovely little white fold. So remember we used the pencil over here before to get that little tip of the petal to fold up. So I'm going to do the same over here now. Just going to draw the shape in. I've brought it up a bit higher so we can see it in the picture. Bring it around like that. Fill it in with your pencil. And then we can just touch it up with the pastel. Hopefully it'll work. Just going to smudge it a tad. And then pick up my white pastel. So this is the brightest. Some might say you shouldn't make bright things on the edges of your pictures, but it doesn't matter. It's just a practice one. Okay, that was not as successful as the last one. So I'm just going to add a bit more purple through here. Get it to curl. See if I can get it to curl a bit more dark in there. Yeah, that's better. And make the bottom side of this little curly bit slightly darker with a touch of purple. That's it. Need to sharpen the tip. Dust tips that off. Go. I've got some veins in here too, so we can put some light pink veins through there. It's nice, softly, softly pushing in. Really good. All right, now we can move around to the final petal. So this one's a little round one. It's got all the colours in it, pale pink on the bottom, bit of mid purple at the top, and a white, bright white bit of light on the top edge. So we'll do pale pink on the bottom. It sits under the one we've just done, so see if you can get that to go underneath. We'll have to come back to this one and just get the middle of it to go in over this guy. Okay, so nice round edge like that. It's a slight little, not a pointy tip, but it's got a slight tip on it, hasn't it? And then filling in this section here with your pale pink. And then get your mid purple and pull that around in here. That, and then we can blend them together. So again, just keeping your finger on the paper, pushing the pink around, sort of start one side and run across the other side so that they're blending in together really nicely. No hard edges. See that lovely gentle blend. This might be my new favourite petal. I like that one. Now I'm going to put a vein in here. So just a little vein using my mid purple. Gently, gently. And then I can just dab those, soften them off a little bit. Beautiful. Add that one a bit more. That one's too prominent, so I'm just going to come back over that with some pink. Get rid of it a little bit. Better. Once you've got all this blended in, you could actually now then run around with your colours and do things like just wiping, you know, a bit of pink over that and not blending it in. And that way you get this beautiful kind of painterly effect with your pastels, and you don't have to be blending it all the time. I like to blend my first layer or two, but then after that, I like to just let the pastel sit on the surface and do its thing, because that's when you get the vibrant colours. It's really lovely. I just saw I need to lighten up in here a bit. So we could potentially do that. So now I've got some dust on my page. I'm going to tick that off. I need to put the shine on this one. Just going to come up around here a bit more with my purple before I do that, because I want to have a nice contrast between the light and the dark. And I also want to bring some light out from the middle, just to pull that through here. Good. Now we can get we go straight to white. Why not? Get the white, and if you want to use a pencil, go for it. I'm going to try with pastel, just drawing a beautiful little arc through there with my white. And then I'm going to thicken it up a tad. So I'm going to come back and draw the other side. And it kind of goes off into a little taper at the top. Whoops, couldn't see my edge there. Tapers off at the edge there. Tip off dust. So it comes up here. I'm just using my pencil now to sort of push it in a little bit. Up through there, and then tapers off over here. Like that. Lovely. Tipping that off. Dust. Just want to dab this in a bit. It's looking a bit dusty. And then I want to get rid of this white over here that shouldn't be there. Let's push that into the green a bit. Okay. So now we need to do the middle bits. We need to put these stamens in the center here. So let's just, what have we got? There's like 3 blobs basically. Just trying to dissect this and work it out and see what shapes are there. So I've got the center bit, and then there's 2 bits that stick up. And there's some little dotted yellow bits around the petals. So if we do the orange first, just blobbing in my bits of orange. And putting some down around here. A few dots on my petals. The yellow is nice on the purple. And then getting the yellow, putting some of that down in here underneath. So because that paper's clean right there, it's much brighter. See how much brighter that is? When I've got to go over other colours, it's really difficult to get those bright yellows like now over the purple. A bit tricky. And a bit more orange. That might just about do it. Lovely. And I need to put some green back down in between these petals here. So if you haven't done that yet, grab your green or a green pencil if you prefer, to get some of that dark down through there between those 2. Beautiful. And if it's looking too flat, just get your other green and do a few little marks in there, and that'll help to keep it alive. Okay. Now's the time when you want to stand up and walk away and have a look at your painting and see how you feel. Because you're up close all the time, and you do sort of get a bit, disappointed sometimes. I do, about what's happening. So it's a good idea to stand up, walk away, have a look, have a break, rest your eyes for a minute, and then just come back to it. And you'll see things you didn't see before that might need to be changed. Or you might not. You might come back and go, wow, that's amazing. How cool. So just, do that while you can. Have a little look. Because we can be too close to things and you can't see what you need to see. I'm just going to come around now and start just dabbing on some more pastel without blending it in. Looking at my tones again and trying to get the beautiful, variation in the tones of everything. Making sure my darks are dark enough and my lights are light enough. And your mids look all right. And then we can come up and do these top petals if you've left space for those. So I'm just going to do those in my mid purple. Lovely, like that. Push it in. And then that's got a little light edge on it. So I'm just going to lighten up that edge there. It's not really bright light. I'm just using my pinky color to do that. It's not very light. It's got a bit of a shine on it, but not much. If you go outside the lines like I just did, just grab your green again and get rid of it. That's the good thing about having a background. You can always get rid of different things if you need to with the background colours. Put a bit of dark in there so I can see I've got two petals. Okay, and then we've got these other ones down here in the corner. So they're kind of lighter, those guys. I'm just going to go with my light pink first. That in with that. And then I've got a little bit of a mid purple through the side there. Oh, that's my dark purple. They look the same. They're so filthy. Oops. Let's just go over that again with some pink. Don't want it to be too strong. And it's got shadow here, a little shadow of something. Don't have to put that in if you don't want to. And then we've got another petal here. Just filling that one in with my light pink. And it's got shadow as well in the corner. Lovely. So the corner shadow is there. And there's a little bit of shadow just on the edge as well, so I can tidy that edge up a little bit with some of my purple. Cool. And then maybe a little bit of light just in the tip here. My pale purple. A bit of shine, a bit of glow. I'm going to tip off my dust. Goodie-o. And then we've just got a couple of other little bits and bobs that are floating around down here. I think I'll just put this one in. I won't worry about those yellow stamens there. They don't really need to be in there. If you want to put them in, feel free. It's your piece of art, so you get to choose. Just pinky colour on that pointy bit there. bit of purple, a bit more pink. Just dancing between the colours, tipping off dust. And now I would run around it with my pastels and just loosely, like I said earlier, just loosely put some colours in, you know, like this without blending so much. Because we want to make it look painterly. We don't want it to look like a photograph. And pastels have such beautiful texture. It's such a nice medium to use, and it'd be good if we can kind of illustrate that to those who may not know how great they are. A few more little veins here and there. Just want to put some really light lines. If you have pencils, you might want to use pencils for this, because they probably won't mark quite as much as the pastel, which is a good thing. You just want to keep them very light and subtle. So just running my eye around the picture and touching up in some spots where it might need a bit more pastel, a bit more work. Looking at your lights, checking you've got all the lights in the right spot, and your veins and things. This one needs some more veins. The veins are actually dark on this one, but I picked up my pink, so they'll have to be light now. Have a bit of both, really. Let's try that and see what happens. Sort of too much the same colour. So that's about that. I just want to put a little bit of light just across here to separate that guy from the other one. And brighten up the lights. So now we sort of run around with your white if you want to, and you can brighten up the lightest parts. So the pale purple we used as a base, basically, just to get the light on the paper. And now you can come around with your white. You can literally just put a bit of shine here and there, just to give it some glow and a bit more vibrancy. So put a bit of white up in here. Put a smidge of it up here, a little bit there. So that's quite nice if you can do that, and you get that lovely pastel-y effect. I'm just going to come over this with my darker pastel. I haven't used this dark purple much at all, but maybe it might just add a little bit more drama to our painting. Let's see what happens. Okay. Very nice, very nice. It's lightening up where that middle part comes out. And we just want to make sure it stays nice and light as it goes down into the centre. So if you've lost your light in some spots, you can pop it back in. There we go. All right, I think we're just about done for the day. I'll tip off my dust. And as I said, I'm looking at this now thinking, oh, a bit rubbish. But I think if you walk away and have a break from it, put it up somewhere so that when you walk back into the room, it's, you know, going to shine at you, and it might not be so bad after all. Okay. Thank you for joining me today. If you're doing the video, I really appreciate you coming along to my classes. It's lovely. And if you want to, please send through a photo of your artwork, because I'd love to see it. And feel free to grab more videos on my website, delicious.art.com.au. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.